The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, Ph.D. I'm Kim Mack-Rosenberg, General Counsel of Children's Health Defense, and we have a great show for you today. First, we've been in high gear in the Ph.D. legal department and working with our outside counsel in filing a number of lawsuits seeking justice on many fronts, including religious and medical exemptions from vaccine mandates. We have lawsuits against school districts, the New York State Department of Health, and the U.S. Department of Defense. But one of the most important lawsuits, just filed in December of 2025, last month, challenges the constitutionality of the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program for those injured by COVID-19 vaccines and other countermeasures. To talk about that critically important suit, I'm going to be joined in a moment by Ph.D. Senior Outside Counsel Ray Flores. I'll also be speaking with several guests about an important bill proposed in Oklahoma, which challenges PrEP Act liability shields for those injured by or who died as a result of, for example, COVID hospital protocols. And finally, Dawn Richardson is here with Advocacy Lifeline to keep us all up to date on important advocacy measures. And she's going to be joined by Dr. James Lyons-Weiler to discuss important Michigan legislation. Before we get started, I have two quick announcements. On Monday, January 19th, we'll be showing AIDS in Africa from the Joan Shenton collection. Additionally, today, there's an FCC oversight hearing, which is going to be streaming on CHD TV. Join that stream after our show. I'd like to bring on Ray Flores this morning. Ray, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's good to be here.
So before we jump into the new CICP lawsuit, can you give us an update on the citizens petition filed by CHD in December concerning removing licensure of COVID-19 vaccines?
Yes, sure. We have over 100,000 people who petitioned already. And remarkably, on the second day, we had over 100,000 people comment. So since then, however, though, it's been going a bit slower. We've had another 2,500 comments added to that. So, Mary Holland was asking for hundreds of thousands of comments. We've got over 100, but we need everybody to step up. If you haven't commented yet, please do.
And Ray, can you explain sort of why it's taking so long to process all these comments?
Well, what they post and what they receive are two separate things. And I think that the reason that they've only posted 3,200 comments so far is that they're overwhelmed.
It's a lot of comments, and I'm glad to see that people are commenting, but as you said, we need to keep those comments flowing in. And we're putting in the show notes a link to where people can go to comment, as well as some tips on how to formulate your comment and some guidance there.
Yes, exactly. I mean, these PrEP Act EUA vaccines were rushed into distribution, and then they skipped a lot of the protocols that are required for licensure. And this is an amazing document that explains everything, and I'm looking forward to the FDA's response and deciding whether or not we're actually going to bring suit over this.
I'm looking forward as well. So that segues very nicely into what we're here to talk mainly about today. So many people think that the COVID pandemic and the pandemic measures are in our rearview mirror. COVID is over. I hear a lot of people just say that generally out and about. But we know that's not the case, particularly with those who continued to be injured by so-called covered countermeasures, such as the COVID-19 vaccine, remdesivir, and ventilators. Can you explain why it isn't the case that COVID is over?
Well, the protections for the covered countermeasures are in effect until the end of the decade. So even if the emergencies are over, either by the HHS or the president, they're still in effect in the sense that they're still protected, and so therefore it's still dangerous for the public to be, receiving these vaccines.
Well, it's dangerous, and this is the importance of this lawsuit. It really limits their ability to receive any sort of justice if they've been harmed. So one of the most important principles here is a legal concept called willful misconduct. Can you explain what that is and how it impacts those injured by COVID-19 vaccines?
Yes, many people believe wrongly that fraud is enough of an allegation in order to overcome or to bring suit against a manufacturer under PrEP, but it's not. The only way you can actually bring suit after filing with the CSIP program is what they call willful misconduct. And it's got three definite elements that need to be satisfied: that the act or omission was taken intentionally for a wrongful purpose, there was no factual or legal justification, and that here's the kicker, is that they disregarded a known or obvious risk that was so great as to make it highly probable that the harm would outweigh any benefit. And so that's the difficulty. And then what the next slide, what you'll see is that there's a manufacturer exclusion, meaning that unless the HHS secretary actually files a complaint against those brings an enforcement action against the manufacturer, there is no willful misconduct. It doesn't qualify at all. You'll see there at the bottom, small I, if neither the secretary nor the attorney general has initiated an enforcement action with respect to such act or omission. And so that's why, even if we could prove that they knew that it would kill people and that they knew that the harm would greatly outweigh the benefit because there was no efficacy, it didn't, there was no, it didn't sterilize, there was no sterile immunity, I think is the correct term. What happened then is, you could prove that, they knew it was a dangerous, deadly drug, but the problem is that unless the HHS secretary brings an enforcement action against them and it's completed, or the attorney general does, then there is no lawsuit against the manufacturer, and that's really, really a problem.
Right, so all the evidence can be there, it can all be piled up for anyone to see, but without that action by the federal government, there can't be a lawsuit. Is that right?
By Secretary Kennedy, actually, or by Attorney General Pam Bondi. Right, exactly.
So you are also counsel in a case called Watts against the Department of Defense. And in Watts, willful conduct is alleged. Willful misconduct is alleged. Can you tell us a little bit about the status of that Watts case?
Sure. What happened is the PrEP Act has a variety of different hoops you have to jump through. The court didn't jump through those hoops correctly, even though I did. So they first dismissed the case and they reopened it. And now I'm wrangling over what three-judge panel is going to be assigned.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, because I know many of us are watching that case very carefully too. But the question that many in our audience, I'm sure, are asking is, doesn't all this have to be unconstitutional? Can you talk about your new lawsuit and also other lawsuits that are out there?
Yes, before I get to the new lawsuit, just want to mention that two excellent attorneys, Aaron Siri and Jeff Childers, both brought cases on the constitutionality of the PrEP Act, or the lack of constitutionality of it. And Siri's case, the epitome of a kangaroo court lawsuit, was dismissed back in September. In fact, he had two of those cases, and he has not, to this, as far as I can see, he has not appealed these dismissals. And so that makes it even more challenging when the best in the business can't get anything accomplished. And then the next lawsuit is Jeff Childers' lawsuit, the Moms for America versus HHS. And he added substantive due process violation, which the court is actually ready to bite on. And he said he would do it immediately back in May, but it's been 8 months, and the court hasn't accepted that being a viable cause of action that would survive a motion to dismiss. So we're still waiting on that.
So have you found a way to go after the constitutionality of the countermeasures injury compensation program?
Yes, several months ago, thank you, I wrote an article with Suzanne Burdick on how the CSIP program does not compensate, the majority, 90% of the injured, because there are requirements that the party, in order to apply, suffers serious physical injury. And so from the next slide, you can see exactly what serious physical injury is. So it's one that is life-threatening, results in a permanent impairment of a bodily function or permanent damage to a bodily structure, and necessitates medical or surgical intervention to preclude permanent impairment of a body function or permanent damage to a body structure. So what about people who have, tinnitus, or what about people who are dizzy, suffer vertigo? What about people who can't sleep, have heart palpitation? Those do not qualify as people who miss work, for example. None of that stuff qualifies as an injury that can be compensable by CSIP.
And who gets to decide, Ray, whether an injury is serious or not?
Well, that's written by by Congress, and so whether or not it would even qualify, whether or not one should even go through the trouble of applying for CSIP would determine, is determined by Congress itself, right? Do you think?
But on an individual basis, for a person who has what many of us would consider, I mean, what you've just described to us are things that I would consider serious, but are not considered serious in the CICP program.
Right, and it would be the HRSA that would put that together and make that decision. Unfortunately, it would get thrown out immediately because it doesn't qualify. And so to do so would be futile.
And we don't even know who's really looking at those medical records when they go into the CICP program at HRSA, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a complete black hole.
So you turned the information that you shared in the article that you wrote in the Defender with Suzanne Burdick into a lawsuit. Can you tell us about that suit?
Sure, it's McKinnish versus the Thomas Ingalls, who's the administrator of HRSA. And the whole idea is that they were injured, but they were not injured in what would be considered to be permanent damage to their body and would not qualify as permanent or serious physical injury. Insomnia, flu-like symptoms, hair falling out, those things are not enough. Anxiousness and nervousness, that's McKinnish's damage. And then Christina Fibble, bad headaches, word loss and clumsiness that has since been recovered. These are not, tremors. These are not permanent injuries, and so therefore they don't qualify. And so they are, they did not apply, and they cannot apply for the CSIP program.
And when you hear those injuries, or when you read the complaint and you see those injuries spelled out, those sound serious to all of us, right? I think, as a layperson, that sounds like a serious injury to me, but they're not serious enough, quote unquote, for CICP.
Right, exactly. And I mean, even though the CICP program is a joke, I mean, they have 42 people who've been paid as of, I checked this morning, there's still only 42 people who've been paid a mean amount of $4,000 each, total for the serious physical injuries. These other people can't even apply at all. And so to cut out all recourse is unconstitutional. It's a violation of equal protection that some people get the benefits of it and others don't. And then it's a violation of due process. They have absolutely no recourse.
Right, because just because they can't file in CICP doesn't mean they can go somewhere else and file a lawsuit or file a claim to try to recover their damages. They're essentially completely blocked from any remedy. Is that right?
Yes, and that's what is alleged in the lawsuit. And if someone, like Jeff Childers or Aaron Siri, when they tried to just bring this up as just being as this whole idea of CSIP being unconstitutional, so far it's not really working. To come at it narrowly and just say, look, just look at this one point, just declare this one point unconstitutional, and that'll drive enough of a wedge, just like you know, breaking a dam. All you need is one hole, pinhole in there practically, and then the whole dam can fall. So that's the point right now.
And I think most people don't realize these really the gatekeeping function of what a serious injury is in the CICP program, even though we know CICP does not, they're a payer of last resort. They're kind of like the Medicaid of compensation programs, right? They cover, even if you get in, they only cover what you can't get from other sources like your insurance. But
Yeah.
these people can't even get in.
Yeah, and that's part of the advocacy from CHD is that we're trying to bring this to the public's attention and bring this to Congress's attention because we do have many people who in government who are reading our lawsuits, reading the defender, and are very aware of the unconscionability of the PrEP Act, and this is just one more reason to hate it.
No, and there are certainly many. It has caused incredible harm, not just during this period, but since it was signed into law back in, I believe it was 2005. But the COVID pandemic, as it were, really sort of brought to the forefront what was happening with the PrEP Act and what the PrEP Act really could do.
Yes. And, when judges or the newspapers or, anybody talks about PrEP and CSIP in particular, they always cite the fact that you can always bring a lawsuit for willful misconduct, in Washington, D.C. But if you don't file for the PrEP, for CSIP under PrEP, then you cannot file in Washington, D.C. That's slide 4. You'll see that there has to be an exhaustion of CSIP, remedies before you file for DC. So, even though there it is right there, it says, unless the individual has exhausted such remedies that are available under CSIP. So you have 240 days to wait for them to rule on your submission, or if you get an offer and you deny it, then you can file. So, this takes away that illusory argument that CSIP provides an ability, an avenue to go to court, under willful misconduct, and every court opinion that it always says you can always file for willful misconduct. Well, Watts is the only case that's ever been filed in DC for willful misconduct in over 20 years. So then to even take that ability away from someone under CSIP because they can't even file, then now it's airtight, completely unconstitutional.
So what's the next step for this lawsuit, Ray?
Yes, well, the government has their responsive pleading due so far on February 27th. And so we're waiting to see. They have 60 days to respond from the day they were served. And usually that means they're going to ask for some type of extension, but so be it. So then we'll just wait and see if they move to dismiss it or what, or maybe they'll just admit it, and we'll see where that goes.
And we continue to wait to see what's going to happen with a properly appointed 3-judge panel in Watts. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I don't want 2 other judges like just stacked on top of the original judge who had no jurisdiction, and then for them to just take a look at it and sign their names to what he had already declared, sovereign immunity. I was reading a motion from the HHS that said that CSIP is a waiver of sovereign immunity. So, So I want this to be reviewed properly from the beginning with a fresh panel, the way it should have been done under the PrEP Act to begin with.
And it's interesting that HHS made that statement about sovereign immunity because it was such a big argument by the government in the Watts case.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll wait and see what they do with it. It'll certainly make a great appeal, if nothing else.
Well, thank you so much, Ray. I always appreciate you coming on and appreciate all the work that you do for and with CHD.
Likewise, Kim. Thank you.
Okay, have a good morning.
Thank you.
And now I'm joined by Oklahoma State Representative JJ Humphrey, Advocate Leslie Batts with Right to Remedy, who lost her husband as a result of COVID hospital protocols, and Advocate Peggy Hockett, who also lost her husband Raymond as a result of those protocols. Welcome, everyone. Representative Humphrey, you've introduced a bill in Oklahoma, HB 3119, if I've got that right, to address issues concerning federal liability shields for COVID injuries. Is that correct? And can you tell us more about this bill and why you introduced it?
Absolutely. This is a bill. I originally met Peggy and Leslie at a hearing that I was having on a totally different matter. And they came up and wanted me to sign a petition on COVID. And I got to know these ladies, and they are passionate about trying to correct the wrongs that happened during COVID and about these legal issues that prevent them from going back and being able to seek a legal remedy because of the time restraints that the courts have set. And so this bill would allow them and others to go back. And again, you're talking about how all of these issues over COVID continues. And until we're able to address the wrongdoers that violated all of our rights and let these things, atrocities occur, then nobody's going to be held accountable and nothing's going to be changed. So that's what this bill is all about, is trying to hold those that were responsible accountable.
So how would this bill work?
Well, it's going to extend the time limit that allows us to go back and file civil liabilities against some of these players, against medical people, against anybody that was found liable or could be found liable in these. And I don't think it's just limited to COVID, but it's mainly going to be COVID because that's where they were restricted,
And Leslie, can you tell us a little bit about Right to Remedy and explain why, from your perspective, this bill is really needed?
Absolutely. Right to Remedy was something that we started to bring awareness to what was actually happening during COVID and the misperception that there was full immunity. And as Mr. Flores spoke about before, there are so many restrictions to be able to bring a action under the PrEP Act. What we're looking at doing with this particular bill is it's addressing causes of action that were actually outside the scope. And there have been some decisions that have been outside the scope of the PrEP Act. So things like failure to treat, battery, all of these things that occurred along with the things that happened in the hospitals for COVID that aren't being addressed. The courts have already made some decisions that they are no longer covered under the scope of the PrEP Act immunity. So because at the time there was this huge obstacle and hurdle to overcome with the PrEP Act, attorneys weren't sure, they didn't have a roadmap to how these claims could be brought. In the interim, a lot of these statute of limitations expired and that kind of thing. But as long as there was that procedural bar under the perceived PrEP Act immunity, our legal argument is that if the claim is not allowed to accrue, then the statute of limitations never actually starts. So this tolls and extends cases that were specifically barred procedurally by the PrEP Act for COVID. And it's our feeling that local and state jurisdiction should be retained by the courts in cases that aren't covered under that scope.
And I think people don't realize that in many, many jurisdictions, those statute of limitations that are relevant to the claims you're talking about are very, very short. People don't have a lot of time to file after an injury, for example, occurs.
Exactly.
So, Representative Humphrey, what are the next steps for this bill?
Well, first of all, I've really made the Oklahoma House Representatives extremely mad in filing a lot of these types of bills. We've actually tried to pursue some criminal actions with this same mindset and through the AG, and so we want to find a doctor. We've got a couple of doctors in the legislature. We would like to find a doctor that would carry this. So we're going to try to move it from me to one of those that would have a better ability to speak to these issues. If not, I'm going to keep the bill, try to move that through the committee. It's going to be a challenging bill because I don't understand why, with all the information out now that we know about COVID, why it's so difficult. The media will not even report on these issues, these types of bills. We had one of the largest interim studies in the state that I know of that people turned out for COVID, yet the media doesn't want to report it. The legislators don't want to hear these kind of actions. They will bury this. They will kill it, keep it from coming to committee. So we've got a big challenge in front of us. I mean, these ladies right here are pretty passionate and they don't give up. And so I think we know that we've got a challenge. We would like to find somebody that has that kind of, with their position, like being a doctor that people would listen to and take more, seriously. I don't say I'm not taken seriously, but that they would have their experience and their credentials maybe to carry this out and say, hey, Humphrey's right, Peggy and Leslie are right. And again, it's not that hard to see. I mean, all we're trying to do is extend the time periods when people can file legislation. So really, it doesn't take a doctor. It really doesn't take a law degree to say these are unfair practices that limit people from their ability to seek recourse. And that's all we're saying, is that if there was something that was done wrongfully, illegally, mishandled, misappropriate, give us the appropriate avenue and vehicle that we can pursue correctness and rightness in the courts. And so I don't think it's that difficult to see the bill, but I will tell you, anything that attaches itself has a COVID attachment. You get ready. It's a fight. It's a challenge. And I don't understand that with all the information that we have now on COVID.
Thank you. And Peggy and Leslie, I both want to just say how sorry I am for your losses. Both of you lost your husbands. And so, Peggy, this is very personal for you as well. You lost your husband, Raymond, as a result of treatment he received in the hospital. And we're going to be showing your interview from the Ph.D. bus tour later, and we'll link it in the show notes. But can you briefly explain what happened to him and why you support this bill?
To tell me my husband was going to die. He didn't say he was going to die because he was sick. He said, your husband's going to die because he's unvaccinated. And what did you expect? So when you look at my husband's hospital records, he got no treatment, in my opinion. He didn't even get basic care. And what they got paid for not taking care of him, if my husband had died at home looking like that, I would be in prison.
And I think, when viewers see your segment, if they haven't seen it already, I've watched it. It is absolutely, they will be, and I'm so sorry he went through this and you went through this, but they will be very disturbed by what you're able to show.
Yes. And that was his hospital records, because you're not allowed in there, so you don't know what's going on. I was blissfully ignorant, and I thought they were doing the best they could do. until 2 days after he died. The crematorian called and asked me, Peggy, what did they take out of your husband? I thought they had me confused. And I met these widows on Facebook, COVID widows, and they said, go get his records. I got them, and I was horrified.
And Representative Humphreys, in closing, did you want to make another remark?
Absolutely. I just want to say that these two ladies have kept great records on the acts that occurred to their loved ones, and that we've used those records to take to the Attorney General, and that we put a brief together, and I put a probable cause together. I'm a law enforcement officer. We put a probable cause and we placed it in front of the Attorney General to pursue criminal charges. So these two ladies have worked unbelievably, kept records, have done great things. They're not only working for legislation that allows us to go back and sue these people, but they're also just a major part of making sure that our AG's feet is held to the fire to try to get criminal charges. And again, that's possible to go all the way to Fauci and those in between him and Oklahoma that participated in the criminal acts that caused these protocols and caused these deaths from COVID-related deaths. So they're doing an awesome job. They're doing a great job, and we are not just doing legislation, but we're pursuing other, criminal charges.
Well, thank you all for coming on today, and we are going to be watching Oklahoma very closely to see what happens with all that you've brought up today. And over to Dawn Richardson and Advocacy Lifeline.
Hello, my name is Dawn Richardson, and welcome to Advocacy Lifeline. You're live here on CHD TV, and thank you so much for joining us today. The purpose of this show is to help empower you, our viewers, to use your voice to affect changes in law, policy, and public opinion through education and action for issues that are important to you and your family. This is not medical or legal advice, so please don't take it that way. And these views are my own and not necessarily the views from the National Vaccine Information Center, where I work full-time as the Director of Advocacy, or for Children's Health Defense. So there's real trouble brewing in Michigan. There's a group of state representatives that are launching a full-on attack on parents using vaccine exemptions for their children. They have filed a package of 11 bills, House Bill 5344 through House Bill 5454, that increase intrusive vaccine tracking and reporting and disclosure of vaccine status to create pressure and intimidation against families using vaccine exemptions. While the bills don't flat out eliminate all exemptions, they put enough obstacles in front of parents using vaccine exemptions to make it much harder for families who don't want to use some or all vaccines. There's a brilliant scientist. His name is Dr. James Lyons-Weiler. He is known to those of us who follow him in his writings as Dr. Jack. He usually doesn't get involved in specific legislation because he's so busy doing so many other things. You will often find him publishing articles which have the effect of holding those who espouse to support public health to be accountable to real science. His research and writing has the effect of calling out these phony scientists who are nothing more than really disciples of the vaccine religion. To my pleasant surprise, he recently came out with a warning article about these Michigan bills before pretty much anybody else did. It's titled, Michigan Tries to Go Full Tilt Against Vaccine Exemptions. I was impressed with not only his ability to read and understand what these bills were doing, but also in his understanding of the real world impact of what each of these bills do individually and, very important, collectively. He's so fun to listen to because he's just so smart. I would like to welcome to the show today Dr. James Lyons-Weiler, or Dr. Jack.
Hey, thank you so much, Dawn. It's an honor to be seen that way. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us today on Advocacy Lifeline. I really appreciate it. Now, I've been involved in this issue for a lot of years, and I've followed many, many articles that you've written and different times that you've testified on issues, and you're such an advocate for holding these people accountable. I would love for you to spend a couple of minutes just telling us about yourself. And I know you can't even do it justice in a few minutes, but for the people that haven't seen you before, this may be your first introduction to them. So kind of tell us your background and a little bit about yourself.
Actually, I'd like to people just look me up. I don't want to spend time talking about myself. These bills are too important, if that's all right.
That's fine. Okay, you can. We'll bring up your websites a little bit later.
Sure.
But okay, let me ask you this then. Since this isn't the usual stuff to comment on, what led you to write your article warning about these 11 Michigan bills?
Well, listen, I've been at this since 2015, and I've been called into 18 different states to testify on legislation, mostly from 2016 till 2020, till about 2020, maybe 2019. And we can see the big picture of what's happening at the national scale and at the state level. We have protections at the federal level that certain states, the blue states in particular, would love to dispense with. Protections like freedom of religion, protections like freedom of speech. You have certain fundamental protections, but then you also have other protections that the U.S. Constitution and rulemaking at HHS affords, which we can get into if you want to. But the idea that, Michigan might repeal the exemptions and force mandates, as has happened in Connecticut, for people who want to express their freedom of religion by refusing vaccinations, is fundamentally flawed. In fact, there was a major lawsuit during the COVID years, you will recall, of someone who wanted to not have to have their children be exposed to certain so-called educational material in school on the basis of religious grounds, and the Supreme Court agreed that people can bring their religious beliefs into public school this way. So when Michigan for Vaccine Choice contacted me and said, hey, there's a public comment period with the Michigan School Board, they're testing this out for public comment, it was really clear that, the Michigan School Board would love to probably just rubber stamp and do anything that Michigan Department of Health and Human Services wants them to do. But imagine having a bill that will compel schools K through 12 to disseminate immunization data to HHS and Michigan Department of HHS, that families could be notified by email that their child's vaccination status is different from those of their peers. Now, you might see, well, listen, this is communication to the parents or so on, but this is actually a form of coercion that puts the family at risk of stigma and harassment.
Yes.
The schools having to post the data on websites and display physical notices. Come on, this is putting the kid in an untenable peer position and can lead to conflict between the child who's not able to truly consent to medical procedures, and the parents who may have very good reasons. That's just the first one.
Let's start stepping through these. I think to give people some clarity on them, and that concept isn't new. I've called them for years school shaming bills, and it's we fought it back several times in Arizona and here in Texas, and it literally is designed to pit parent against parent, even children against children. And I think it's really important to note that when you have a small population of people taking an exemption, even though some of these bills say, oh, the data is de-identified, you can still figure it out. Like, okay, if they do a breakout of how many vaccine exemptions are in the first grade at this school or something like that, and there's just say there's 2 kids with stainless steel lunch containers, or the the mom is, is smelling like essential oils or something, you can kind of piece together who are the people who are a little more concerned about their kids' immune systems and that type of thing. So you can still figure it out. De-identification isn't going to protect the families.
That's true, and people talk, right? So parents will talk. The people who are vaccine risk aware or anti-vaccine will talk to other parents, and hey, I heard about this kid that died after this vaccine, and so the parents can self-identify then, and then they could be found out to be part of the 10%, and then their kids, might overhear it and so on. So listen, the right to privacy does in fact exist on medical issues. I mean, we have HIPAA, we have FERPA, and these are clear violations or attempts to violate this in a passive aggressive way, even if the intent is only to quell the discussions so parents don't try to out themselves as being the anti-vaccination parent in the school. But in small schools, it's especially a risk of violation of privacy and stigmatization. And then the second bill, HB 5345.
Oh, let's start. Let's just bring the first bill up so people can see it. Go ahead. We have a slide for it, just so people know. The first bill, Michigan House Bill 5344. It's just going to require schools to share new student vaccination status to parents on the school website, homepage, and in the office, and provide exemption status statistics to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So that's the first one. And then we've talked about that and what the problems are with that. Now moving to the second bill, it kind of does the same thing, but it's doing it for childcare. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, another lesson that the Michigan has apparently not learned is that you can't bring vaccine mandates into the workplace. A child care center is not, it's government regulated and that you have to be licensed, but a child care center is not the same thing as a school, a public school by any means. A child care center might be private or semi-private or even public, but many of them are just in persons' individual homes, for instance, somebody who's licensed for child care. They're reaching in to make individual citizens who own businesses de facto agents of the state to then enforce mandates to whatever vaccine the state wants children to have. This is mission creep, and people may or may not know this, but during the switch from Obama to Trump, there was a rogue administrator at HHS that actually published and pushed out a false mandate for all children going into preschool in Region 5, I think it's called, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. The Ohio group was upset. I brought them to the Pittsburgh group, the Pennsylvania group to talk with them. We put our heads together and decided we would just write to the administration and ask for clarification on policy. It turned out that, yes, this was in fact an outgoing regulator who decided to take all of the law of the United States into their own hands and mislead parents in Michigan. Right now, parents in Michigan are completely misled anyway to think that they have to go to some kind of education session so that they then acknowledge by coerced speech that they're putting their child at risk. There's no legislation backing that whatsoever. All you have to do in Michigan is notify the school, I don't want my kid to come to school vaccinated. We're declining the vaccine. We are exempt. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to defend it. And most of the public health this is consistent with the sly, non-transparent approach towards government of healthcare.
Yeah, it's a creep. It is for sure. It is definitely a creep. And this particular bill, 5345, House Bill 5345, it also extends to the staff of the daycare. So, now child care centers have to share the children's vaccination exemption status with parents enrolled in child care and on the website. And they also have to keep track and store the staff members' vaccine status on site, on location. So, it's really creepy.
I have a message for Michiganders. If you want to make it really, really difficult to find childcare for your children, pass vaccine mandates in child care centers for the staff. Because you will only be able to hire people that are willing to vaccinate. The child care center owners may not want to vaccinate, and so all of this would be challenged in court. But these bills are right now in committee, and there's no sign that they're going to go forward right now. But that could change any minute.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. All right, let's move on to Michigan House Bill 5346, the third bill in this series. It requires the Michigan Vaccine Tracking Registry to allow users to look up and access the child's vaccination status data by school building, down to your location, geolocating, we're putting a target on the schools so that parents can start saying, well, I don't want to send my kid to this school because, and it's ridiculous to do this because the vaccines don't prevent infection and transmission. So it's a lot of times. And so having a kid with an exemption is not necessarily a problem, but yet they want to stigmatize the schools and put pressure on the families who are choosing not to give the vaccines.
Yeah, let's call it what it is. It's state-sponsored, enforced consumption of medical product. That's all that it is. Listen, you're right. So for pertussis, there's no guarantee of prevention of transmission. In fact, pertussis vaccine, the Tdap or DTaP, they can actually create asymptomatic carriers that bring infections into schools. It's the same. Clearly, it's the same. The MMR component for mumps is failed, and we have entire schools that are fully vaccinated per the schedule that have outbreaks of mumps. Measles, asymptomatic transmission of measles is real. It can occur. Vaccine failure can occur. So if there's an outbreak, so to speak, or if there's a surge in measles that is coming to your county or in your state, chances are it's going to make it into that school one way or the other. What is the benefit of restricting individual rights by mandates? What is the benefit of then requiring all of this police level reporting on percent vaccine uptake when that's not a good predictor of vaccine success anyway? Absolutely right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and all vaccine tracking systems have been used to identify, pressure, coerce, harass, and discriminate against individuals who have refused to take one or more vaccines. And the Michigan Care Improvement Registry, MCIR, they are accessible already, the info, by local health departments, pharmacists, doctors' offices, schools, childcare facilities, and health insurance entities. So, now you're looking at identifying the schools and putting pressure. So it's just one more step. All right, let's go on to the next bill. House Bill 5347. This integrates the newly required exemption form that we're going to talk about when we talk about House Bill 5348 into existing school and health department reporting of student vaccination status, and requires schools to ensure their threshold of students with vaccine exemption documentation is at 90 or 95%, depending on the time of the fiscal year. So what they're trying to do is make sure that the schools are going to have papers on all the kids and send it to the health department. You either got your proof of your vaccines or you've got your proof of your exemption. And it's turning the schools, like you said before, into the enforcers, agents of the state. And then finally, the bill requires this biannual reporting by school districts or intermediate school districts of the students' vaccination status. They do say it has to be de-identified, and we talked about how that's a scam. Let's talk about the problems with this bill.
Well, part of the problem of all of these bills is that they're starting to try to centralize what was further just an ambient distributed process. And that centralization of information this way will allow them to exert political pressure on schools and school boards. So the pressure here is on the schools and the school boards. They will try to seek school board appointees that are more friendly to this. They will try to get principals and so on who won't make the announcement. For years, the vaccine exemption forms that went out were never mentioned in state after state after state. At the same time, that the announcements of vaccine mandates were mentioned, the parents were never notified. And that's not just Michigan, that's in Pennsylvania and New York and elsewhere. So keeping imagine an educational institution intentionally keeping the public ignorant on something as important as what's going to be injected into your children. So this we're going to talk about in a minute why that specific certificate, the change to a specific certificate, is important. Right now, under Michigan state law, any parent just needs to write a letter to the school. And I would, not a legal advice, I'm not a lawyer, but I would advise that you actually put in there a restriction to say that you would expect that this letter stay in the school office and it's not distributed to any other individual or entity, and force the issue of making sure that that information stays at the school and does not get transferred. The problem with these bills is that people start talking about the bills before they're passed as if they're law. They start enforcing them, and they think that they can do this and say, well, it's just a trial. Let's see how that goes. No, you can't do that with personal individual rights. We don't experiment that way to try to push the issue and see if you get any public pressure over people standing up for their rights. But let's not get wrong. Let's not live in la la land. The state does have authority in public health. The state has authority. It's just Michigan was not comfortable, obviously, in past generations of centralizing that authority, and there's no need to do it. I mean, they could have been reporting this for the past, 25, 30, 50 years, but they weren't. Why is that? Well, freedom-loving Michiganders know exactly why. Information is power. And if you empower the state with information, then the people that will abuse that information will do it to restrict your personal liberties.
Absolutely. And the next bill is the tool that they're going to be using to collect that data and to create that power even further. This is House Bill 5348, and this requires the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services forms as described in the next bill, House Bill 5349, to be used when claiming vaccine exemptions. Instead of right now in current law, it just requires a written statement by a parent or a physician. It's not, you're not required to use a specific form. What's also very concerning to me, and I know you pointed this out as well, it just crosses out the terms religious convictions and other moral objections and substitutes instead a very sterile non-medical exemption, not calling out religion specifically. They say on the form that if you have a religious objection, you use the non-medical exemption form, but it's no longer a religious exemption, which carries certain degrees of protection because of our Constitution. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so in Michigan, I happen to know already that there are people in positions of power that are misdirecting parents, saying that, well, if you go with this type of objection, it's going to be administratively longer. You should go with this one, and they're putting them all under a generic objection, non-medical. They're trying to make as many medical objections as possible non-medical. Why? So when they flip the switch and do away with non-medical exemptions, they have to say, you didn't have a medical exemption. It's not like the system is going to remember that conversation, nothing in writing. And so this is consistent with that, where they know that they probably can't do away with religious exemptions. But then if you are forced to speak, the state controls your speech, and that coerced speech causes you to omit something that you wanted to say, that you are forever bound to that speech as if it's your own. That's a problem. So anyone with the right mind who has a religious exemption, cross out objection. If it's a paper form, ask for a paper form, cross out objection, write religious exemption, and exert your state-given rights. They're here. The state has these rights. So why are they playing language games? This is 1984 Orwellian language games all over again.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next bill, House Bill 5349. And what this does is it adds more statutorily required steps to the process for parents to claim a medical or non-medical vaccine exemptions, what they're calling it now, for their children. The bill requires MDHHS to create forms for both types of exemptions. The medical form now has to be used by a healthcare provider, which before it was a physician, but now they're expanding it to other people. And the parent at the local health department, the parent must sign this form. They have to do it in front of this person at the local, this health officer at the local health department. They have to go in there and the parent has to endure some education session receiving the information about the benefits of the vaccines. And, this is very intimidating.
Just a moment. It doesn't seem like the slide advanced on the screen. So you might want to advance the slide on the screen. Go ahead.
Oh, no, this is 5349. I just kind of expanded a little. Yeah, it adds more obstacles.
Okay.
It did. Yeah.
Okay.
You have to sign it before a local health officer, and they must describe vaccine benefits.
Yes. Okay.
To
Sorry.
the parents. Yeah. No problem. I couldn't fit everything I wanted to say on the slide, but here's the deal that I really want to point out. So when health departments and other agencies are creating rules, they're doing it to implement laws. The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services created a rule to have these forms, have parents go down, pick them up, sign them in front of someone, endure these vaccine brainwashing sessions. They've already been doing this.
That's right.
This is cover your ass by the Michigan Department of Health with the legislature to try and get legislative authority, which they don't have for what they've already been doing. And that is a problem. We're not going to reward a rogue agency for going outside the bounds of the law, abusing their rule writing privileges by giving them legislative cover for this terrible, unlegislated, illegal activity that they've been doing. So this is really what this comes down to, is maybe they felt they were vulnerable to a lawsuit and this whole system could be dismantled. So they're trying to go in and cover themselves with these bills, to do this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right, Dawn, that this original position of having an educational center session with coerced speech of signing the ceremonial manipulation was overreach. And so they made a rule, and many parents followed the rule, and then it became apparent that they were out on a limb. And so now they're trying to backfill themselves legally, as you said, CYA. And I agree completely. It's my sentiment exactly. We should not reward these bad actors who are trying to normalize the process first by rulemaking and then have to back it in by codify by law. There's something wrong here. And those people who are behind this should not be rewarded. In fact, they should probably be sanctioned by the House, I would imagine, politically, for trying this. This is just an egregious abuse and overreach of centralized power.
And now, because there are mandates, and this is where the problem stems from, we shouldn't have vaccine mandates at all. Now you're having to ask the government for permission to not follow the mandate. And they're it's like a perverse game of Simon Says. The health department says, come down here, do this, do this, do this. And if you don't do every step and subject yourself to this kind of these vaccine re-education talks and dialogues, that you're not going to get your exemption. And the really hard part for me is there are a lot of families that feel strongly about this, but they're not confrontational. Parents aren't confrontational in nature. They want to be good community servants. They want to support their school and their kids.
Sure.
And they're not going to go, maybe their child had some reactions, but this process of intimidation, of having to go down there, get the form, sign it in front of someone, go through these sales pitches on vaccines to try and warp your thinking, is that really how you establish trust? I don't think so. Just this process alone should give rise to concerns for parents that maybe this isn't something that they should be doing if this is what it takes to
Agreed.
convince
And the
people.
last bill that we didn't mention actually forces schools, et cetera, to send the data to municipal governments. Again,
Yes.
politicizing the issue and co-opting the power of the centralized government in the state. And so I would be very, very cautious moving forward if I were on the other side, because we know what's happening. Michigan for Vaccine Choice knows what's happening. Everybody's on top of it, and there will be a fight, and fight after fight after fight. So, Dawn, thanks for bringing this to everyone's attention.
My pleasure. And notice there are no Senate bills. These are all House bills. So we've got some work to do for sure. Moving on, so we just have a few minutes left. I want to get through these. House Bill 5350 requires local health officers to submit written reports to their local county and/or city government officials by June 1st of every year, beginning in 2028. And these reports must include the vaccination levels and vaccine exemption percentages of school children. The report has to list any school in a local health department's district that has vaccine exemption levels that is greater than 5%, as well as the department's plan to reduce this exemption level below 5%. Since when does your right to practice your religion depend on how many other people are practicing their religion? This is ridiculous. It's awful. This definitely has to be opposed.
I call these things constitutionally tone deaf, right? So these things are constitutionally tone deaf. And when you do the centralization of power over individual rights, it reminds us why our founding fathers thought it would be great not to have a king, thought it would be great to have 50 states that acted as independent experiments. Well, not 50, they didn't know it was going to be 50, but 13 states that acted as independent experiments in this new representational democracy, this government. And also why decentralization is such a good thing when it comes to governmental processes. We want an intelligent, community-based uprising of information on how to get and stay healthy. That's what MAHA is all about. Community-based. Bobby's doing everything that he can do from the top down. But the community-based will not be able to talk to other parents about other things related to health if they're fighting about vaccines with each other. So this is also, remember, a divide and conquer technique to keep the anti-vaxxers marginalized so they don't bring in things like, by the way, unhealthy polyunsaturated fats are really unhealthy. And by the way, high carbs in the morning will cause your kid to crash in the second session. By the way, look at the new food pyramid and here's why it's right. This castigation and marginalization of healthy ideas then allows pharma to continue to create more and more customers with metabolic disease and diabetes. That's a grand social manipulation. And I love Michigan. I love Pennsylvania. I love all of the United States of America that want to stand up for personal liberties. But please, the fight is not worth it. Don't break relationships in your family. Don't break relationships in your school just to win an argument. Because just wait and be patient, plant the seeds and let them find out for themselves. You don't have to be the one to save them because they won't listen to you. They really won't listen to you. Should you talk with people? Absolutely. But you have to test them out and say, hey, did you know that they're trying to circle the noose around our necks on these rights? And there are 200 and something other vaccines that are slated to go into the childhood vaccine schedule. If what are we going to do then? And how do we know every vaccine is safe for every child? These are conversations that are safe with people who have come a certain distance down the rabbit hole, so to speak. But please try to keep your social glue together with the rest of the parents in your schools. It's so important that you be able to participate in community without hiding, without shame.
Because that's the goal. That's the goal of these bills, is to marginalize, to bully, put peer pressure on families, ostracize families, so your kid doesn't get invited to the class birthday party and so on and so on. Spreading fear and misinformation. This is their tactic. How good can the process be and the procedures be if these are the tactics that they have to resort to convince people? All right, moving on. House Bill 5351. This bill establishes a process for Michigan to disregard ACIP vaccine use recommendations and maintain vaccine requirements prescribed by rule in effect on January 1st of 2025. This is part of a multi-state effort to really clash back at and rebel against the current administration, where they want to be keeping the vaccines, even if our federal government, upon closer review, sees that they're either unsafe or unnecessary for certain age groups and applications. They want to be able to do whatever they want. And I am all for state rights. Don't get me wrong. States should be determining these things, but not to the point where you're going against common sense safety and use recommendations altogether and being able to do whatever the heck you want because these products are mandated. And that's the problem. Because they're mandated and they want to go rogue and use these other organizations like the American Academy of Family Physicians, American Academy of Pediatrics, American College of Physicians, which, by the way, each of these groups have conflicts of interest with pharma. These are trade organizations, and they want to be able to use, they're adding these organizations to the reasoning for the guidance on how to make the schedule. They could go total rogue against ACIP with what this bill is setting up.
Yeah, absolutely. So remember, everyone, in 2016, the Democratic National Convention sold their soul to pharma. They received and accepted so much money to get rid of exemptions, both non-medical and religious, across the states that they thought they could target, which really led to crystallization of our resistance, with Bobby traveling and Del Bigtree and Mary Holland and myself and so many other people traveling and testifying from state to state to state that there's something wrong with the idea of taking away an exemption. Why did our forebears, who did write vaccine mandate bills and laws and pass the laws, also see that exemptions were necessary? It's a steam valve over vaccine injury. It's a steam valve over personal religious beliefs so that society can move on. They want to pitch this fight into the state of Michigan that they lost at the national level. I just don't think they've learned their lesson. And so Michiganders who are looking at deferring to centralized power for their personal liberties, do you trust them, or do you trust the people who wrote the U.S. Constitution? I don't know. I trust the founding fathers. Make sure that your personal rights are not valid, that are not violated in any way, but rather instead are validated by the processes that you write into local law. It's so important that we stand up for personal liberties. And, the idea that there's some greater good that can come from forcing vaccine mandates for everyone. The only thing we're going to do is find every child in the state of Michigan or elsewhere who's susceptible to vaccine injury. That's all that will affect. It will not change the amount of hospitalization. If you look at the changes that ACIP actually made, they're bringing America into alignment with many other nations who have less stringent and fewer vaccines.
And nothing is stopping.
And I don't see mass hospitalizations from chickenpox and mass deaths from chickenpox in countries that don't mandate that. And so, we have a problem with pharmaceutical companies getting involved in politics this way, and that itself needs to stop. I became an independent long before Secretary Kennedy did, because I had to step aside and say, hey, wait a minute. I'm just going to look at this from a purely scientific standpoint. I can't look at it politically, but I have to throw the DNC under the bus. And so there'll be political blowback. If they get any of these bills that are passed, there'll be political blowback on the DNC in Michigan. You can count on it. People will be replaced. Appointees will be replaced. There will be people who are primaried who never thought that they were primaried. So I'm glad that it's at the House. And then, right now it's stuck in committee. If it goes to the Senate, then will the governor sign these into law? There's political ramifications that are immeasurable when everybody's watching.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the next bill, House Bill 5352, kind of sets up the whole process by which the state can divorce themselves from ASIP. And they have this Michigan Advisory Committee on Immunizations, and they're the ones kind of overseeing everything here. And they're going to be looking at if any of these groups have if more than one group have a differing schedule, they're going to consider and then adding vaccines to the schedule, or when they're given, changing how the mandates are implemented. And so this is just one more step. This is finalizing the process by which we're taking decision making and putting it into this committee who is appointed and not elected. They're not accountable to the voters, and it translates into mandates for your kids. So that bill, another oppose, obviously. And moving on to...
Wait, can I say something here?
Sure.
This ASIP is functioning under the state of Michigan laws, which requires public comment. So this Michigan ASIP, when they start holding their meetings and discussing, they will be taught the following. Vaccines can cause autoimmunity through molecular mimicry and pathogenic priming. Vaccines can cause autoimmunity if they include aluminum hydroxide, which a huge percentage of childhood vaccines do. So when you recommend a vaccine that then becomes a de facto mandate at the state, you are mandating autoimmunity. You're mandating death. And this is the lesson that this new ASIP has yet to learn because it's new. But when they come online, you can bet that doctors and scientists like myself and parents will show up and talk about the devastating effect of vaccines on some people's lives.
It's very sad. And you've been doing this long enough to know, things are changing, but injuries and deaths are still happening, and that it shouldn't be happening to the degree to which it is. Now, another step in the process here, the next bill, House Bill 5353, requires health insurers to provide coverage for vaccines described in the Public Health Code, which is, the vaccines that are mandated. And this establishes a process for Michigan to disregard vaccine use requirements from ASIP, and it maintains the vaccine requirements that in rule were in effect as of January. And of those, now it requires the insurance companies to cover it. I want to talk for a second about mandates, insurance mandates. Anytime you have a mandate, it increases the price of the premiums for everybody. The insurers just tack the amount onto their premiums. And this makes insurance less affordable for everyone when you have the insurance mandates. And it's forcing people who don't use vaccines to, in a way, subsidize through higher premiums coverage for those who do want to use vaccines. They're unfunded mandates, and they definitely have been tied to increased insurance premiums for everybody, which it results in poor health outcomes because people don't have access to care because they can't afford it.
That's true. And I have one question for the legislators that are trying to push this in. Why didn't you include insurance coverage for vaccine injury? Vaccine injury is a medical condition. Vaccine serious adverse events. If you're going to mandate that insurers cover vaccines, then the product insert actually determines the serious adverse events. And I think it's arguable that then the insurance company should be forced to cover that as well. And they won't do that because it will break the bank. No one can afford vaccine injury, not even the families. So Dawn, this has been a great experience. Thank you so much. I hope everybody shares the video. If I might say, at IPAC EDU, we have a course in autoimmunity that's starting tonight. And Tori Alexander and Javier Figueroa are actually going to offer this. It's my lectures. There's about 16 lectures on this, and there'll be group discussions after every lecture. So if you want to understand the causes and processes and therapies and treatments for autoimmunity in humans, this is a great course, and I encourage everyone to do it. Usually it's $160 or $180. Now it's $45. So everybody's welcome to sign up for that and become super educated. You'll learn exactly how autoimmunity is caused in humans, and you'll know more about autoimmunity than your doctors, that's for sure.
I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm just going to mention the final bill just allows for standing orders. It expands who can order them and administer vaccines by standing orders, and expands what conditions qualify for standing orders. Just another way to remove people from working directly with their doctor, screening for contraindications, for past health histories. Again, it's all part of this, like you said, centralized control. I want to thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Jack. This was a great conversation. I think it gave a lot of people a lot to talk about and to think about. And take that focus, contact your legislators in Michigan, your reps and your senators. All 11 of these bills are in the House Government Operations Committee right now. People from Michigan should be flooding that committee with opposition to these bills. And if you're in another state, now you know when you see a bill worded like this, that it is really part of a real effort to try and centralize and stigmatize families, centralize power, and coerce and force people into vaccinating. And it's one step towards removing the exemptions altogether. So thank you for coming on. Is there anything finally in closing that you'd like to share before?
Yeah, that last bill actually abrogates the rights to informed consent completely. And so that bill has to be fought off as the others do. But your pharmacist does not know what informed consent is, and they deny you informed consent if you accept a vaccine or do not accept a vaccine. If they offer a vaccine but don't hand you the product information sheet and the vaccine information sheet, the VIS in particular, there's violations, hundreds of millions of violations of the rules of informed consent in the administration of vaccines across the country. So they think they're going to wrap this up with standing orders. They have another thing coming. There's going to be a big investigation into violations of informed consent, a whole revolutionary reform on enforcement of informed consent. They have no idea how far out in the woods they are on this issue. These standing orders are illegal and unnecessary.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. And for everyone else out there, please share the show with others, educate people, get them involved, donate to CHD TV, donate to NVIC so we can do more of this work. We'll see you in 2 weeks on Wednesday at 10 o'clock Eastern time, 7 o'clock Pacific time. God bless y'all. God bless America. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Okay, we are live. We're going to do your story first. So can you tell everybody your name, who you are?
My name is Peggy Hockett.
And we've got two stories, Peggy. Let's start with the story of your husband. And this is him here.
Yes, this is my husband, Raymond. Raymond went to the hospital because he thought he had COVID.
What year was this?
2021. Mm-hmm. And he thought he would get some steroids, antibiotics, and he had diarrhea and throwing up a lot. So he thought he'd get some kind of help. He went to the hospital, and of course, they gave him a COVID test. They get paid extra if you have COVID. They admitted him. You get paid extra at a hospital if they admit you. They gave him remdesivir. They get paid extra if they give him remdesivir. They ventilated him against his will. They get paid extra if they ventilate you. He died in that hospital. They get paid extra if you die in a hospital. Now, my husband went in with diarrhea, and every day they gave him X-Lax. Now, I'm not saying this, the hospital says this. I went and got his records after I found this group, former feds, and they said, get his records, because you're not in there, so you don't know what they're doing. And my husband told them 4 times, no, I do not want to be ventilated. Well, they tied him to the bed. They put this in his records, and they ventilated him anyways. They gave him fentanyl, propofol, Prepacet, midazolam, oxycodone, and they ventilated him against his wishes. They put in his hospital records, is he in danger of being kidnapped? Kidnapped. Because on our group, we do have some people that are survivors their family went in and abducted them out of the hospital and saved them. Who knew? I didn't. I was blissfully ignorant.
I just want to try and understand this. I get that they make money. We've done so many stories on that. So when your husband went into hospital, you were not allowed to go in with him, correct? Because of COVID. So the last time you saw him was when he said he was going to go into hospital. Describe him again. Okay, he had diarrhea. Did he look like a man that was going to die?
No. I have lupus, Raynaud's, Ledderhose, fibromyalgia. I have every disease in the world. I got COVID too. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't have the diarrhea, and I wasn't throwing up. He thought he would go and get some help. You know, hospitals are supposed to help you, not murder you. So when he went, they immediately started badgering him to be ventilated.
But did he have a breathing problem?
No, he did not have a breathing problem. No, ma'am. He just thought he'd get some steroids and antibiotics because they said he had COVID pneumonia. How do they know the difference between COVID pneumonia and pneumonia?
Were you speaking to him on the phone while he was in hospital?
One time, the very first day, while he was at the emergency room, they gave him remdesivir. I didn't know this till I got his records. Then when they got him to the hospital, they gave him remdesivir again. And I never really talked to the man again, because when I would try to call his phone, he didn't answer. I would call the hospital and the nurses said, well, we're busy. We will go see why he's not answering his phone. They never did. When my husband passed away, they couldn't find his glasses. He was in an ICU room by himself. He couldn't see without his glasses. So how did his glasses get lost? Good question, correct?
So what happened? Did they call you and say your husband's passed away?
They called me a couple of days before he passed, and they said he's not going to make it. And I said, well, I'm coming down to see him. And they said, no, you're not. I said, you and what army's going to stop me? So they talked to one of the head nurses, and she said, I don't see any problem with letting her come and say goodbye to her husband. So they don't let you in to see them.
Did you go and say goodbye to him? No.
I did. I went and sat with him that day. He was ventilated. They're not awake. Do they know you're there? I don't know. But you go and you sit and you hold their hand and you tell them goodbye. Now, we took in abused animals for many, many years. Not one of our animals died alone. Why is people in the hospital dying alone? Why? Why can you not go see this person? Now I'm going to tell you why. Because I went and got his hospital records.
Okay, so look, before we go into this, people, there might be some images that you might find, if you're squeamish, or you might find upsetting, I don't know. But we're going to disturbing. We are going to show you these now live on camera. These are official hospital records. Okay, let's do it.
So, it says my husband has a hole in his abdomen. They didn't take pictures of that. But in 9 minutes, they called the organ donation people to come and get his organs. He wasn't an organ donator, and they knew that. I called the people at the organ donation place, and they told me it's a state law. They are called automatically. That's a lie. I went to the Capitol and I asked questions. It's all lies.
So they took his organs?
We don't know.
But
they said they didn't, but why does he have a hole in his stomach that they don't show? It raises red flags to me. If there's a hole in his stomach and they call them within 9 minutes, they get there, why?
So after he's died, there's a hole in his stomach. He didn't have a hole in his stomach before he died?
Not that I know of. I wasn't there.
Okay.
You're not allowed in there. So when I get his hospital records, I went to bed and I cried for 3 days. I couldn't get out of bed.
What is that?
That is my husband's face. That's his cheek. They put the ventilator so tight that it ate down to his cheekbone and he got black fungus. That's another picture of his cheek. Pretty nasty looking, right? That's his nose, where they left him on his stomach, and
Is he dead here in this picture?
yeah, that's his nose.
I can't make it out.
You can barely see, you know, they didn't do real great on the pictures. This is a slap in the face when you open these and you see these. Because I believed in my heart they did the very best they could do.
Okay, what
That's
is
my husband's buttocks.
What are we looking at?
That's his buttocks.
But what is this? A sore? Or what is
Yeah,
it?
that's his skin peeling off
Skin
and bruises.
peeling. Oh,
and
dear God.
his buttocks was hanging in pieces.
Oh.
He was on a ventilator for 3 weeks.
Oh, dear God, what's that?
That's his buttocks. Do you see the skin hanging?
I'm so sorry.
Does it look like he died from abuse and neglect or COVID? Me, myself, I'm saying abuse and neglect. That's his stomach where they let the leads like electrocute or something. He got blisters and boils and that's his knees.
What is that bruising? I can't.
That's bruising. That's, I don't even know.
Oh, poor
But
man.
that's his knees. That's one. And my husband passed away the day after our 32nd anniversary. So that was another
Terrible.
detrimental, and that's his other knee. And in his hospital...
And these are, again, people, these are hospital records.
Yeah.
So there's no conspiracy theory here.
No.
This is it. This is straight from the hospital.
Don't believe what I say, believe what they say. How can they dispute what they say? How can they dispute the pictures they took them? I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to retrieve a body, you don't lift up the covers and check out their body. You don't. Now, I wouldn't have never known this if I hadn't got his records. Now, in his records, it says, is he in danger of being abducted? Because we have joined a group, formerfeds.org, and we have survivors that their family had to go in and abduct them out of the hospital to save their lives. When have you ever seen this in a hospital record?
No.
Is he in danger of being abducted? They tied him to the bed, and they put this in his records. They tied him to the bed, and they gave him fentanyl, propofol, Prepacet, midazolam, Oxycontin, oxycodone. They knocked him out with lethal injection drugs so that they could ventilate him. And in it, it says, is he getting adequate nutrition? And it says, probably not. So they know that they are starving these people. They're not giving them food, water. They're not letting family members in. And it goes on and on and on. At the end of his hospital records, it says, did he die with an infectious disease? And it says COVID and other. Won't say what other. And the doctor left a note and said, I called the funeral home and gave them a verbal speech of what he had. What did he have? Was it the black fungus, sepsis, staph? Was it one of the nasty things they gave him? And see if they list that on a death certificate or in a hospital record. They have to account for where he got these infectious diseases. And they don't want to open themselves up for that. So they just put other. So again, am I the crazy one? I don't believe so.
It's just, what's this?
And this is one of our groups, former feds, and it's different stories. You can go on.
So there's many more stories about this kind of hospital protocol. This is fascinating, and this organization is formerfeds.org. So do we go to you if we're in a similar situation and our loved ones are being held in hospital?
They have the frontline nurses on Facebook.
Yeah.
And you can go to them. And my story doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't. Let's carry on.
After my husband passed away, I go to church, and I've been to this one church for 18 years. And I met this big, beautiful man there that is a widower. And we started dating, and we were going to get married. But this man did not know before he met me, and he got vaccinated.
He got Pfizer. All right. Did he just get one?
He did. And then he met me, but the one made his arms swell up so bad, and the hair fell off of his arms, his legs, his chest. He couldn't move his hands. His story is on Former Feds, Glenn Mahan. So we were dating, we were going to get married. And he had a massive heart attack 5 days before we got married. So I took my wedding dress and I wore it to his funeral. So I have 2 dogs in this fight. We're mandating people get vaccines, and they're dying. Massive heart attacks. But Glenn also got blood clots on the bottom of his foot. And I do have pictures of that. They would go and take these blood clots off, and they'd come back. And his toe would leak blood. 18 months he could not even walk. He was on a knee walker because of these blood clots. He never had them before the vaccine. You know, he had so many things go wrong after the vaccine. He said, Peggy, I'm just so tired. I've got these blood clots on the bottom of my feet. They called them pressure wounds. Like he said, he never had them before, and he had lost 100 pounds. So if you was going to have a pressure wound, you'd have had it when you were heavier, you'd think. But it was like a blood clot, and they'd come back and come back. And then he had a massive heart attack, and he was just gone. And he had been out with me. It was Mother's Day, the day he died. We had been to church, and he had brought all of the older widows roses, because he was just that kind of man. So he had brought everyone roses, and we had went out to lunch, and he was talking about it that day. He said, Peggy, they say the vaccine injured probably has 2 to 5 years before this vaccine's going to kill us. He said, and I'm just passing my 2-year mark.
We are so sorry that you've endured all of them. It's just must breaking your heart.
Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow. But that's why I'm out talking about it.
Thank you.
Because so many people don't know this and don't believe it. And if I just told them my story, they wouldn't believe it. I have family members that don't want to see the hospital records. Because I tell everyone, if you don't believe me, call me. I'll have lunch with you. I will pay for the lunch, and just look at his records. Mm-hmm. Look at his records.
Well, we will get this story out far and wide. We would love to have pictures, please, so we can put them on the memorial. And thank you so much for just speaking up, speaking out.
No, thank you for what you're doing. This needs to be told. America needs to wake up. They are murdering people in American hospitals for the money.
All around the world needs to wake up.
Yeah, we need to wake up.
Right, well, that's why it's important that this story gets out. We'll hand you over to what I think we'll do is take your story, get it edited, get as much of these pictures in. So all of those things you've shown me, if you can have
I left a packet.
Yes.
I left a packet with the guy
Thank you.
outside, so you'll have some
you.
of the records and pictures.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Well, now, you've also got a story, haven't you?
I do. My brother Michael Hood was a veteran from the Army. We're all military. And he went to the VA hospital, and he was having difficulty breathing.
Had he been vaccinated?
No. And they
Okay.
asked him in the medical records if he was vaccinated, and he said no. So I believe he was targeted over there as well. They tested him for COVID. It came back negative. They proceeded to give Michael the hospital protocols, which included remdesivir, which has a 54% kill rate. They took it off the market in 2013 because it was killing 54% of the people that were on it. This is the same hospital that diagnosed Michael earlier in 2021 with stage 4 kidney failure. Now, according to Gilead's own website, anybody with an EFR marker, which checks the kidney levels, if anything under 30 should not be given remdesivir. Michael came in at 23. They proceeded to give Michael a double dose of remdesivir the first day, and then every day thereafter they gave him an additional dose. On day 1, Michael went in. He told them, I do not want to be ventilated. They told him, if you do not get ventilated, you're going to die. And they told him this day in and day out that he was in the hospital. Michael said, no, I want to go home to die. So they said, okay, so they put him on hospice. They did not release Michael from the hospital for an additional 4 days so that they could give him the remdesivir. He was given morphine, midazolam, everything to shut down his breathing abilities. They killed my brother. He went home on a Saturday. I went to go see him, and I was giving him some ivermectin in his mouth, and I didn't know about the remdesivir at the time. It wasn't only until I got his records. Because I called the hospital and I said, don't give him remdesivir. And they said, okay. So where that got us. He came home. I started immediately giving him ivermectin, doxycycline. As I went to put the pills in his mouth, his whole mouth was bleeding. He was bleeding out of his mouth. He took off his mask and he said, I can't breathe with this thing on. And I said, well, don't put it on. So I gave him his doxycycline, the ivermectin, and I told him, I said, Michael, I'm going to go. I'm going to let you rest. I'll see you tomorrow. I love you. He said, I love you too, sis. And I closed the door. And then I got the call the next morning that he had stopped breathing. And in his records, Michael did not have COVID. He had bacterial pneumonia. All he needed was antibiotics and some breathing treatments. They killed him. We're a military family. We swore an oath to the Constitution. We're Air Force. My brother was Army. My dad's Army. He served his country, only to have his country kill him. I'm an interviewer with formerfedsfoundation.org. I hear these stories. I hear Peggy's story day in and day out. This is what I do. I get off these interviews and I lay in my bed and I cry because this is killing us. This is killing the families that are left behind, because as they come across these medical records and they see this, they're becoming awake and they're sharing their stories, but the stories are hard to hear. You guys know that because of what you guys are doing. So I will be eternally grateful for you for getting this out to other people, because people need to know. Hospitals are killing us, and they're killing us for money. The hospital got over $500,000 for his death.
$500,000 for your brother's death?
For my brother's death.
How old was your brother?
He was 59.
I'm sorry. We're sorry. Thank you for what you're doing. And once again, please, because Children's Health Defence stands shoulder to shoulder with organisations. There's no competition here. We are so grateful for you doing these stories, and however we can work together to warn the people before we go into the next COVID shot. Thank you for doing this very important work, and you're seeing a lot.
We also do vaccine injured, and a lot of people come in with vaccine injured now. We do the interviews for them. They get myocarditis, pericarditis, death. I mean, just Glenn. I met Glenn. Beautiful, beautiful man. I loved him. Great man.
And they killed him.
And they killed him too.
All right. Thank you both so much. We're going to go and sign the bus, and please keep in touch with us. Truly. Thank you for the work you're doing. I'm so sorry about you. This is painful, both of you. Okay.
I did leave this back.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.